I still remember the look on my father's face when I told him I had spent every dollar I owned on an old gas station at the edge of town. Disappointment, not anger, not concern, just pure disappointment. "You bought what?" he asked, staring at me across the dinner table. "A gas station." My mother nearly dropped her fork. My older brother Ethan laughed so hard that he spilled his drink. For a moment, I thought they were joking. They weren't. A gas station. Ethan repeated, "Not an apartment, not stocks, not a business with actual customers." "It is a business," I replied. "No," he said. "It's a rusty building next to a highway that nobody uses anymore." The room exploded with laughter. I felt my face burn. For years, I had worked every job imaginable: construction, warehouse shifts, night security, food delivery. I had saved every spare dollar while my friends traveled, bought new cars, and enjoyed their lives. I had one goal: to own something, anything, something that would finally belong to me. Then I found the gas station. Most people saw a disaster. The pumps were outdated. The roof leaked. Half the lights didn't work. The convenience store inside looked abandoned. But I saw something different. Potential. The property sat beside a highway exit that was scheduled for expansion within the next few years. Traffic would increase. Businesses would move in. Land values would rise. At least that was my hope. The station cost nearly everything I had saved over 10 years. It was a terrifying decision, but I believed in it. Unfortunately, my family didn't. Dad shook his head. "Son, you've always been stubborn." "What does that mean?" "It means you've just wasted your future." The words hit harder than I expected. My father had never supported many of my decisions, but hearing him say that still hurt. Mom sighed. "We just don't want to see you fail." Ethan smirked. Too late. The conversation only got worse. My cousins heard about it. My uncles heard about it. Soon the entire family was discussing my crazy investment. At family gatherings, I became a joke. Whenever someone made a bad decision, Ethan would grin and say, "Well, at least you didn't buy a gas station." Everyone laughed. Every single time, I laughed too, mostly because it hurt less than showing how much it bothered me. A month later, I quit my stable warehouse job and began working full-time at the station. That decision convinced everyone I had completely lost my mind. The first weeks were brutal. Customers were rare. Equipment broke constantly. The coffee machine stopped working. One pump failed, then another. Some nights I sat alone for hours without seeing a single customer. The bills kept coming. The savings account I had spent years building started shrinking even further. More than once, I wondered if my family was right. Maybe I had made a terrible mistake. Maybe I was chasing a dream that didn't exist. One rainy evening, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. He stepped out of his new luxury SUV and looked around. Water dripped from the station's old roof. A flickering sign buzzed overhead. The parking lot was nearly empty. He smiled, not kindly. The kind of smile someone gives when they know they're winning. "How's business?" he asked. I knew exactly what he was doing. "Fine." He laughed. "Come on, Jake. This place looks dead." I stayed silent. "You know," he continued, "my company is hiring supervisors." "I'm not interested." "You should be." He glanced around again. "This station isn't going to save you." I looked at the cracked pavement beneath my feet. Part of me wanted to argue. Part of me wanted to scream. Instead, I simply said, "We'll see." Ethan chuckled. "Sure." Then he climbed back into his SUV and drove away. As his taillights disappeared into the darkness, I stood alone beneath the flickering sign. The rain continued falling. The station looked old, tired, forgotten. Maybe everyone else saw a failure. Maybe they saw a man who had thrown away his future chasing a foolish dream. But standing there that night, I made myself a promise: no matter how hard it became, no matter how many people laughed, no matter how long it took. I would prove them wrong, and someday the same family that mocked me would wish they had believed in me from the beginning. The first year nearly broke me. Every morning, I opened the gas station before sunrise. Every night, I locked the doors long after everyone else had gone home. There were no vacations, no weekends, and certainly no days off. The station became my entire life. I fixed leaking pipes myself. I painted walls myself. I cleaned bathrooms myself. When equipment failed, I watched online tutorials and learned how to repair it because I couldn't afford a technician. Most days, I worked 16 hours straight. Some nights I slept in the tiny storage room behind the convenience store because driving home felt like a waste of time and gas money. Meanwhile, my family continued to enjoy reminding me of my mistake. At every holiday gathering, Ethan found a way to bring it up. "How's the Millionaire gas station owner?" he would joke. Everyone laughed. Even relatives who barely knew me joined in. I smiled through it. What they didn't know was that things were slowly changing, not dramatically, not overnight. But little by little, I started paying attention to what customers actually wanted. Truck drivers wanted hot coffee at 4 in the morning. Travelers wanted clean restrooms. Families wanted quick snacks and cold drinks. So I focused on those things. I replaced old shelves with newer ones. I negotiated better prices with suppliers. I expanded the snack section. I added fresh sandwiches and breakfast items. Customers began returning. One customer became 10, 10 became 50. 50 became hundreds. The growth was slow enough that nobody noticed. Except me, every week I tracked every dollar. Every month, revenue climbed a little higher. By the end of the second year, I was finally making a profit. It wasn't a fortune, but it was real. For the first time since buying the station, I could breathe. Then something unexpected happened. The state officially approved the highway expansion project, the same project everyone said would never happen. Construction crews arrived, road signs appeared, traffic increased, exactly as I had predicted years earlier. The station suddenly sat in a prime location. New customers poured in daily. Truckers stopped regularly. Travelers filled their tanks. Construction workers bought meals and drinks every morning. Business exploded. I hired my first employee, then a second, then a third. For the first time, I wasn't running everything alone. The station that everyone called worthless was becoming something valuable. Still, I kept quiet. I didn't tell my family. I didn't post about it online. I didn't brag. Success felt fragile. I was afraid if I talked about it, it might disappear. 3 years after buying the station, I paid off every business debt. I remember staring at the final payment receipt. My hands were shaking. For years, I had lived with constant fear. Fear of failure, fear of bankruptcy, fear of proving my family right. Now, for the first time, that fear was gone. I sat alone in my office and cried, not because of the money, because of what it represented. Every insult, every joke, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, none of it had been wasted. A few months later, I attended a family barbecue. As usual, Ethan was the center of attention. He had recently bought a larger house and loved talking about it. The conversation eventually shifted toward work. One cousin asked me, "Still running that gas station?" Before I could answer, Ethan laughed. "I can't believe he's still holding onto that thing." Several relatives smiled, waiting for the joke, but this time something felt different. I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I wasn't ashamed. I simply nodded. "Yeah, still running it." Ethan smirked. "Must be barely surviving." I took a sip of my drink, then calmly replied, Actually, business is doing pretty well. The table became unusually quiet. Really? My uncle asked. Really? How well? I shrugged, well enough that I recently finished paying off all my debts. A few eyebrows rose. Ethan's smile faded slightly. For the first time in years, nobody laughed. The conversation quickly moved on. But I noticed something important. The way people looked at me had changed just a little, not respect. Not yet, but curiosity. And curiosity was far better than ridicule. Driving home that night, I realized something. Success doesn't silence critics immediately. First, they ignore it. Then they question it. Then they envy it. And eventually, they try to claim they supported you all along. I didn't know it yet, but my family was about to enter the envy stage. Because the small gas station they once mocked was becoming worth far more than any of them could imagine. And soon, they would discover exactly how wrong they had been. 5 years after I bought the gas station, my life looked nothing like it had before. The station that once sat nearly abandoned beside a forgotten highway exit, it had become one of the busiest stops in the region. The highway expansion was finally complete. Thousands of vehicles passed by every day. Truck drivers stopped regularly. Families traveling across the state filled their tanks, grabbed food, and stretched their legs at my store. What had once been a struggling business was now thriving, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I expanded the convenience store, installed modern fuel pumps, added a small restaurant section, built a larger parking area for trucks. Every improvement brought more customers. Every customer brought more growth. The numbers that once seemed impossible were now appearing in my monthly reports. I could hardly believe them myself. One afternoon, a commercial real estate developer contacted me. He wanted to buy the property. At first, I assumed it was a joke. Then he made an offer, a very serious offer. An offer that was more money than I had ever imagined owning. I thanked him and declined. The location was only becoming more valuable. Selling now would have been short-sighted. Still, the offer confirmed something important. The property everyone had mocked was worth several times what I had paid for it. For years, my family had treated the gas station like a symbol of failure. Now it had quietly become one of the smartest decisions I had ever made. News travels fast in families, especially when money is involved. Within weeks, relatives who hadn't called me in years suddenly started reaching out. Some wanted to catch up. Others wanted to see how I was doing. A few acted as if we had always been close. I noticed the pattern immediately. The jokes had stopped. The criticism had disappeared. The people who once laughed at me were suddenly interested in my success. Then came Ethan. He showed up at the station one Saturday afternoon. His expensive SUV was gone. Instead, he drove a much older vehicle. His confident smile seemed forced. For the first time in years, he looked tired. Older, worried. "Hey, little brother," he said. I raised an eyebrow. He hadn't called me that in a very long time. Hey. He looked around the station. The crowded parking lot, the busy store, the line of customers. I could practically see him comparing it to the empty place he had mocked years earlier. "You've done well." The compliment sounded painful coming from him. "Thanks." He shoved his hands into his pockets. I heard about the offer. Of course he had. Family gossip moved faster than the internet. I nodded. Yeah, his eyes widened slightly. "So it's true." "Which part?" "The amount." It was close. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he laughed nervously. "I guess you proved everyone wrong." "Everyone, not we, not I." "Everyone?" I almost smiled. "Looks that way." His expression tightened. There was something else on his mind. Something he hadn't come to say yet. Eventually, he got to the point, "My company has been struggling." I listened quietly. The economy hit us hard. He looked away. "A lot of bad investments." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Years earlier, he had mocked my investment relentlessly. Now he was explaining his own financial mistakes. "I see." He cleared his throat. "I might need some help." There it was. The words he never imagined he would say. The words I never imagined I would hear. For years, Ethan had treated me like a failure. Now he was standing inside the business he once laughed at, asking for help. Part of me wanted revenge. Part of me wanted to remind him of every cruel joke, every insult, every moment he had humiliated me in front of the family. But another part of me remembered something important. Success had already become my revenge. I didn't need to hurt him. Life had handled that part on its own. "I'll think about it," I said. Relief immediately appeared on his face. "Thank you." After he left, I stood near the front window watching customers come and go. Years ago, I had stood in almost the exact same spot, wondering whether I would lose everything. Now the business was stronger than ever. But Ethan's visit was only the beginning. Over the next few months, more relatives started appearing. An uncle wanted investment advice. A cousin needed money for a business idea. Another relative asked if I could help pay off debts. The same people who once treated me as a cautionary tale were now treating me as their solution. And then came the call that shocked me most of all. My father wanted to meet the man who had looked me in the eye and said I had wasted my future. The man who never believed in the gas station. The man whose opinion had hurt more than anyone else's. For the first time in years, he wanted a private conversation. Something told me this meeting was going to change everything. And I had a feeling he wasn't calling just to apologize. When my father called and asked to meet, I spent the entire night thinking about what he might say. For years, our relationship had been polite but distant. We spoke at holidays. We exchanged birthday messages. But the closeness we once shared had slowly disappeared after I bought the gas station. Every joke from the family hurt. Every criticism left a mark. Yet my father's words had always hurt the most. "You've wasted your future." I had never forgotten them. 2 days later, I met him at a small diner on the edge of town. He was already sitting at a booth when I arrived. For a moment, I barely recognized him. His hair was grayer. His shoulders looked heavier. Age seemed to have caught up with him. When he saw me, he stood and shook my hand. It felt strange, formal, like we were business acquaintances instead of father and son. We ordered coffee. For several minutes, neither of us said much. Finally, Dad sighed. "I don't really know how to start this conversation." I waited. He stared into his coffee cup. "Your mother and I are having financial problems." The words surprised me. My parents had always been careful with money. What happened? He looked embarrassed. Medical bills. My mother's health had declined over the past 2 years. Nothing life-threatening, but enough treatments and procedures to create serious expenses. Then came home repairs. Insurance increases. Unexpected costs. One problem after another. The savings they had spent decades building had nearly disappeared. I listened quietly. Dad took a deep breath. "I hate asking for help." I knew that was true. My father had spent his entire life helping others. Asking for help was probably one of the hardest things he had ever done. Then he looked directly at me and said something I never expected to hear. I was wrong. The words hung in the air. For a moment, I wasn't sure I had heard him correctly. "What? I was wrong about you." His voice cracked slightly. "About the gas station." He looked away. "I thought you were making the biggest mistake of your life." I remained silent. "You saw something none of us could see." A sad smile crossed his face. "And instead of supporting you, I joined everyone else in criticizing you." Years of disappointment suddenly seemed visible in his eyes. I should have believed in my son. The anger I had carried for so long began to soften, not disappear. But soften because his apology sounded genuine. There was no excuse, no attempt to justify his actions. Just honesty. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. The words hit harder than I expected. For years, I had imagined this moment. I had imagined confronting him, demanding an apology, telling him how much he had hurt me. But now that it was happening, none of that seemed important. I looked at the man sitting across from me, the man who had worked long hours to provide for our family, the man who had taught me discipline, responsibility, and perseverance, the man who wasn't perfect, just human like the rest of us. "I appreciate that," I said. Relief washed across his face. Then he lowered his head. "The truth is," his voice became quieter, "we need help." There it was, the real reason for the meeting. Not greed, not entitlement, need, actual need. And somehow that made all the difference. I asked questions, reviewed the situation, looked at their finances. The problems were serious but manageable. A few weeks later, I paid off their medical debt. I arranged repairs for their home. I also set up an investment account that would provide them additional income moving forward. When I handed my parents the paperwork, my mother cried. My father couldn't speak. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The son whose future they thought was ruined had become the one protecting theirs. Word spread through the family quickly. Relatives expected me to celebrate my success by refusing everyone who had mocked me. Some even encouraged it. But I didn't, because over the years I had learned something important. Bitterness is expensive. Holding on to anger costs more than letting it go. That didn't mean I became everyone's personal bank account. Far from it. I declined many requests. I set boundaries. I refused to fund reckless ideas or irresponsible behavior. But when someone genuinely needed help and was willing to help themselves, I listened. Months later, our family gathered for my parents' anniversary, the same type of gathering where I had once been the punchline. This time felt different, very different. During dinner, Dad stood and tapped his glass. The room became quiet. He looked around before turning toward me. I'd like to say something. Everyone listened. For years, this family laughed at my son's dream, including me. A heavy silence filled the room, but while we were busy criticizing him, he was busy building something remarkable. He paused. Emotion filled his voice. "I'm proud of you, son." The room remained silent. Then people began applauding. Not because of the money, not because of the business, but because everyone understood what that moment meant. It wasn't about a gas station anymore. It was about belief, persistence, and proving that success doesn't belong to the people who never fail. It belongs to the people who refuse to quit. As I looked around the room, I realized something. Years earlier, I had wanted revenge. I wanted everyone who doubted me to regret it. But standing there beside my parents, watching my father smile with pride, I understood the truth. The greatest victory wasn't becoming wealthy. The greatest victory was building a life so meaningful that even the people who doubted me eventually believed. And that old rundown gas station, it didn't just change my future. It changed my family's future too. And it all started the day everyone laughed.